We had some audio issues in the previous one, so we have just we're going to the part two of this, which is the same thing, and we'll be continuing further with the session, and hopefully the voice is audible now. So we are continuing with the content on the chapter one, which we were talking about. So let's move to the same thing. Let me just So here we are, and we were talking about the chapter one. So let's look into the same thing. So we are talking about 1.3, that is seven testing principles, and the seven testing principles you already know. Testing shows presence of defects. Exhaustive testing is impossible. Early testing, defect clustering, pesticide paradox. Testing is context dependent and absence of error fallacy. So here, generally, we know about the seven principles. For more detail, you can visit the video for the principles of testing. But generally, these principles are important to be followed throughout the testing principles. So generally, the questions what you can expect from this chapter is, directly from the principle. They might be giving you a statement, and they can ask you that which one is this principle we are talking about, or maybe they will give you the principle and they give you options as statements, and you need to make sure that it is working perfectly fine as per that and pick up the right answer. So here is like more detail on that. So what each principle is. So you'll find the same in the videos. You can explore that together. Now, when you come to the test process, this is the most critical part of the chapter one. When you talk about the process, we have a lot of standard phases of that test planning. Generally, you perform all the planning activities, the core activities, what you can see here, where a test manager is important and plays a vital role to determine the activities. And all you need to take care of is supporting and assisting the test manager to determine the best plan for the entire process. On the other side, when we talk about monitoring and control, it is a process of measuring the progress on the project, which is done with help of matrices, where matrices are certain formula or formulae which can help you measure an entity with some kind of calculation. Whereas the test control is a necessary action or controlling actions which are taken if your plan seems to be deviated at any point of time. But all these activities are the responsibility of the test manager. Analysis, you begin with your process where you start analyzing the requirements and start to finding the flaws in the specification and see that everything is clearly documented and issues are being addressed. On the other side, when you talk about the test design, is where you write the test cases and prepare supporting test data for those test cases. Implementation is just like getting started or getting ready for execution, where you prepare your test suites, test beds, and prepare your test script if you have planned for automation, preparing the test execution schedule, and all those such necessary things which are required before the execution to be done will be done here. Test execution, it's the general thing where you execute the test cases and you generally perform the activities of testing and report the defects and also track the defects to get it resolved. Completion is the closure activity where you generally perform some of the activities which are done post-release, and internally within the organization we also know it as retrospective activities, which is conducted to gather information and collect data throughout the process, and many other activities which you can see in the slide right now. Being the last topic of the part of it is like newly added called as the test work product, where they are telling you what are the work products. So just in one line, when you talk about work products, these are the documentation which are usable throughout the process and prepared during the life cycle. So when you prepare a document during the process and it will be reusable later in the process, you call it as a work product, and each documentation such like that will be known as work product. So we are documenting about that. And then we are talking about the traceability between them, where test basis means any such documentation which is used as a reference for testing, and the test work products what you prepare. So you must have always traceability between them, which will help you to identify if any further coverage is required to be done or no. At the last topic in chapter 1, we are talking about the psychology of testing, which is generally to deal with the process where you're talking about the understanding or the mindsets between the developer and the tester. So generally, we say that the developer and tester may go different with their mindset, and we try to make sure that uh, they are being addressed with separate kind of understanding, where testers are good at finding defects, developers are making the product. So of course they might be different in terms of understanding each other. So we say that testers are really different and they are biased from the developers, so they can find good defects and have good queries resolved. Let's come to the quick chat and see if we have any queries there. Yes, we have a question from Asif. Who prepares the documents, not the test cases? Okay, is it like the who prepares the documentation? Yes, we have different people talking about different documentation. So, say for example, you talk about test planning, it will be done by the test manager. You talk about test cases, will be written by the tester. If it is a monitoring report or any such logs, will be respectively created by different people. So, I mean, you talk about preparing the code, it is developer. Designing will be architects within the organization. So, different documents are responsibility of different people. No problem with that, Asif, at all. My job is to answer your questions and make you understand. All right, so here we are back with this. So generally, when you talk about the questions from chapter 1 will be the very easy and simple ones, and very straightforward, and we cannot generally expect a typical trickiness on these type of questions. So make sure that you can easily work on the content and get resolved with your queries. And here are some sample questions which I've also put the same in the slides when you talk about the specific videos on the same. So, say for example, in the previous question, if you see which of the following provides the best description of a test case. Now, when you talk about the words like best, we in ISTQB make use of a lot of things like that, like most, least, best, or maybe not. So these are the words which are used. So when they use the word like best, it means that there are more than one option which might look similar to each other and might confuse you, but all they want is 100% clarity from you that which is the best answer for that. So in that case, if you get confused with any of the option and you think that there are two or more options which are looking similar, actually they are not, because they have purposely designed this question in such a way that you think that two or more options are correct and get confused with that. But of course, there will be only one option which would have the right answer to that particular question. So here in this case, the right answer is B. That is a set of input values and expected result with execution precondition and execution post conditions developed for a particular test condition, where test condition generally means a scenario. So that will be the thing. So you need to be just careful with these type of questions, what they can ask you. And for more details and justification of each question, you can visit the video for that chapter and the topic. uh, so I have a separate video for sample questions, so you can visit there. So I don't have enough time here to discuss each and every question, but yes, of course, you can find them in more detail there. If you have any questions, you can put it below so that I can help you. All right, so moving to the chapter two, we have four topics to understand here. That is software development models, test levels, test types, and maintenance testing. Now, when you look at the software development models, of course, it is about the waterfall and V model, which we generally talk about from the past. But we are looking at the different strategies which we can really take care of within the syllabus. Remember, team, the certification is limited to the content what you see online, but it is not beyond that. So all you need to make sure is that you are you know stick to the content what is given to you, and you are not going anything beyond that. Generally, a lot of people start exploring it, getting into the depth of it. No, you really don't have to do that. You can just ignore everything else, and you can just talk about the content specific understanding. So here we are trying to understand the four good characteristics of testing with help of V model, and we are trying to understand that what are the good characteristics of testing. So generally we have four good characteristics. That is, for each and every development activity, there must be a corresponding testing activity. For each test level conducted, you must have a specific objective to that level. And then when you talk about the third one, which is about the testers must be involved as early as possible in the life cycle, and testers must be involved in reviewing those documents when you talk about static review and so on. So here you can see the 4 points which I'm talking about. And analysis and design of test for a given test level should begin during the corresponding development activity. So that means this happens right earlier. That means we don't wait for the code to be prepared formally so that we can move to the other thing as like testing and creating the test cases and then looking at the requirements and all. No, you don't wait for it. So you just keep on moving. So that's from the four specific things. Then we have different methodologies which you can quickly go through. We are categorizing them into different categories like sequential models, uh, iterative models, iterative incremental, and all, to because feel the difference there how testing is conducted. Sequential model testing only happens when everything is done. When you talk about iterative, this testing is a continuous activity and of course invites a lot of efforts and support from the team. When we talk about test levels, in nutshell, we have four functional levels discussed in this particular syllabus, where component testing is what you start with, and we have only one simple definition for that. It is to test the functionality and behavior of each and every feature, which is being testable separately. So each program, each module will be tested separately, and then will be tried on with. So other than that, the important tip from this section will be the 4 points. What do you see at the bottom? These are the important points. Generally, they shoot your question from there. That what is the test basis for component testing and what is the typical test object for component testing. Same way here, we have different test levels and we have different test bases and test objects. So please be sure about these things, that you know the test basis for each level and typical test objects, because very frequently we see a question from here that what is a test basis, or sometimes they ask you which is a common test basis for 3 or 4 levels. Then in that case you need to quickly recall that if you see in integration testing, use cases are my common test bases for three levels, that is integration, system, and acceptance. So if you see these three levels, we have you know the same test basis, that is use case. So it's not limited to what you read, it is also to create the relation between the test bases, because when it comes to the bulleted points, it is more critical to be dealt with, because not all the points is what you can remember at any point of time. So you just make sure that you are going to make sure that you remember the relation between them at the same time also. So I see if you have any queries to be resolved. Okay. So fine. I think don't have any queries now. We can quickly move to the next topic. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. I'll be coming now and then to the chat window, and if there are any queries, I'll try to answer the same. So the next thing is the classification, which we know from the chapter 1 already, and we are looking at the same thing here, that is classification of this, and there are four types. So in chapter 2 we are talking about the right side, that is dynamic testing, and on the left side we'll be talking about chapter 3 in of course chapter 3. So for more details you can view the video for each of these chapters and topics specifically. Yeah, talking about functional and non-functional differentiation, of course, the functional and non-functional differentiation varies from people to people, and of course, organization to organization, depending on the product. So generally, we say that functional testing is something which is to determine what a system must do, and when you talk about the non-functional characteristics, is generally to determine that how it should behave. So when you talk about any such quality characteristic of an application, you make it in non-functional levels. When you talk about functional, you check the core functionalities without which an application is not complete at all. So you put it across to the non-functional levels if it is enhancements of an existing application. So once the application is built, you want it for any such non-functional features like compatibility, configuration, or performance, security, load testing, stress testing. So if you have heard of these levels, these are all non-functional, because generally for non-functional is beyond the functional level, where the application can be used by people, but it's not going to be a mandatory option. So until unless the client asks you to perform those things, you don't do that. But yes, at that point of time, we say that once all the functional levels are performed, then you go with non-functional. But you don't get surprises there. So of course, you already collected information about non-functional features from the customer. So you make sure that it is being integrated right from the beginning, right from the unit level or integration level at the same time. So it doesn't start really after the system testing is done. It begins at an early stage, right from the design phase, you can say, but yes, practically conducted only after system testing is done. Yeah, there are two different types of approaches for dynamic testing. We call it as white box and black box, where white box is performed generally by a person who knows what is the backend, what code is all about, and generally this person accesses the code and performs the activity. Whereas black box is a front end execution, where the person doesn't have any knowledge about the backend code. So this person will work on the front end, that is UI, and try to enter the values to see the output and test the application. There are certain synonyms. Please make sure that it's again a tip for you, that these synonyms are equally important. They may ask you that glass box testing is also known as, or they may use these terms in any other question to put it across to you. Change related testing, we have confirmation testing and regression testing. Confirmation testing is to make sure that the bug which you reported is fixed. And on the other side, regression testing means making sure that the bug which is fixed is not having any impact on the unchanged part of it. At the end, when you talk about maintenance testing, it is about to make sure that when you have released the product, there are a lot of things we keep on happening after the release as well. For example, when you talk about updates, upgrades, migration, and retirement, then we talk about installing the same things and making sure that these things are integrated with an existing live cycle application, because once the application is live, people are already using it, and when you make changes, then it might impact the other part of it which was working fine earlier. So you just try to make sure that you have integrated it well, and it's not going to impact the other features which are already being used by the users. So generally when you get updates on your apps, operating systems, or Windows updates, any such updates which you're talking about, these are all maintenance updates. When you see some of the applications or some of the broader applications, they may prompt you stating that this is going to be under maintenance for this time to this time, so please don't use it, because they will be deploying the new patches or new piece of code to the entire application and conduct regression testing that time. There's a small thing about impact analysis, please take care of that, and similarly the questions will be asked to you from here, and it will be again straightforward, but yes, typical questions can be from the four good characteristics of testing, the levels of testing, and of course the maintenance testing as well. So please be aware of these things, which may help you to answer the question quickly and understand. So if you see all these questions, when it says best, statements best compares the purpose of confirmation and regression. So there might be conflicts, but of course not the right answer. So you need to pick the right answer based on the exact understanding. So the best way to approach a question precisely is read the question carefully and understand the question very well before you even look at the option. That's the best approach I can say. So understand the question, meaning behind that before you look at the options. Because once you look at the options, you start getting confused between the options and you forget the question exactly. So take your time, understand the question, then look at the option, and everything will be much clearer to pick it up from. So let's see if you have any quick queries from here. Okay, no comments yet. So let's continue with the session again. We're talking about chapter 3. Chapter 3 is about the static testing techniques, where we're talking about the review process. So first of all, talking about the static testing basics, that is what is static testing is all about. So I told you in the previous chapter that static testing is generally to review the work products or any such documentation which comes from the client side, or maybe you have prepared at an initial level before you start using them, because the seeding of the defect generally begins at this point itself. That means when you start preparing your internal documentation, and you might have gaps, and the documents might come out of with a lot of flaws, inconsistencies, and so on. So you try to review them before you can use it for further approaches. So here is one of the way, and then you come back to the documentation list which can be reviewed. So there are any such thing which is created can be reviewed. Benefits, of course, early detection of the defects which cannot be easily found by dynamic testing, and many other benefits, that early detection, saving the cost, reducing your overall cost of quality, increasing the productivity, and many such features like that. So there's a comparison as well with static testing versus dynamic testing, that how it is beneficial, and that's going to help you with that. When you talk about review process, there is a fundamental review process. We call it as formal review, which has 5 major activities: planning, initiate review, individual review, issue communication and analysis, fixing and reporting. So during planning, generally the test manager or the manager of that respective domain will prepare the plan and select the people who will be reviewing the document. So review is a process where you generally review the document. It can be lightweight, it can be heavyweight. Lightweight means simple and sound. Heavyweight means involving a lot of people, creating checklist, making use of entry criteria, exit criteria, and all, and monitoring the process as well. We talk about initiate review. You have the starting of the review process, that is kickoff, where moderator comes into picture, and generally we know moderator as facilitator as well, and the person distributes the document to the individual reviewers and explain them the objective of conducting the review, that why are we conducting, what is that we need to come out of it, is it about KT, is it about analysis, is it about finding the defects in the work products, and so on. On the other side, individual review, people start reviewing independently. It's not a group discussion or it's not a group event. It's individuals who start working on that. Then we have a review meeting, which takes place after that once the preparation is over, where each reviewer will represent their findings to the author. And author will be answering the questions to them and clarifying their rectifications. Once the review meeting gets over, fixing and reviewing, reporting the defect will be done by the author, that is fixing the issues which are unresolved during the review meeting and updating those to the reviewers. Here are the main role and responsibility, which you can go back and refer in more details in the tutorial, which I've already added in the series, which will help you to understand more about it. So let's quickly see if you have got any queries here. So yeah, there is a question from Asif. Are the developers involved in static testing anytime? Of course, if it is specific to them, the question will be involved with respect to developer. Now, developer generally gets involved with the design review, requirement review, and even when they have questions like we talk about the code analysis, algorithm review, or control flow review. So any such document which is of their interest, they will be involved in the review process of that. So they will make sure that these things are reviewed by them and they contribute or they understand those documents, and they are the one who can tell you the defects on these kind of documentations. So you just make sure that they are also involved respective to their documentation, and they will be involved. Moreover, we have static analysis, which is their core responsibility, that is finding the discrepancies in the code when it is written by another developer within the team. So they generally get involved with static analysis a lot compared to static testing, but it is not that they do not participate in static testing at all. There are a lot of other work products which will be reviewed by them. So continuing with the further, that is informal review. So we have four types of review: informal, walkthrough, technical review, inspection, and where inspection is a lightweight process, and informal review is a lightweight process, walkthrough is also lightweight, technical is a little heavier compared to others, and inspection is completely a formal review process, which is the most heavyweight process. The slight differences, the important tip for you at this point of time is remembering each one of them independently, and also creating a relationship between the four types of review. Generally, they put you a question which is match the following from this section and expected 100% for sure. Informal review, these are types of review, there will be one question for sure that they will be asking you, how do you match these following? So one side they will give you the types of review, and the other side they will give you the unique points from each type of review. Now when you say unique points, you need to remember the first point of each type of review in my tutorial is the unique point about each type of review. For example, for informal review, it is no formal process. Walkthrough meeting is led by author. Technical review, it involves technical experts and it is documented, defined defect process. And inspection is actually your formal review process. So if you know formal review process, you know inspection. So actually what they have done is they have first told you the formal review process, and then they're telling you inspection is a formal review process. So you just need to know one of these topics to understand what is inspection. Yeah, there are different techniques as well which can be used in the review process, like ad hoc, or you talk about checklist based, where the parent, the reference becomes difference. Ad hoc is like we don't use any kind of references, we just go randomly to review the document. When you talk about checklist based, we make use of a checklist which is created at the organization level, and generally checklist will have certain questions listed, and when you review the documentation you answer those checklist questions, that yes no, whether it is there or not, and so on. Scenario and dry runs are role based. Scenario and dry runs are generally used in walkthrough, which is done with help of without executing the code. You try to evaluate, like compiling the code or evaluating the codes. We call it as dry runs. Whereas role based is specific, like technical reviews, where individual contributor will be invited to see the same thing and then give the outputs. Perspective basis, where we invite different individuals and ask them to review the document from different background. So respective people will be invited from different domain, like testers, developers, designers, and they will be reviewing a particular document together. So that's perspective based. And of course, at the end, we are talking about the success factors, which is a simple, straightforward subject to understand. That is what factors we generally have to take care for the success of conducting a review within the organization. Because if it's not successful, of course, it's a complete waste of time for the organization and the process as well. So you need to take care of these things as well. The questions will be strictly from the key areas, like the difference between static and dynamic testing. Second will be from the formal review process. Third will be from types of review. And fourth will be from the techniques. And one question from anywhere, again repeated. So we have 5 questions from this chapter. So just be sure about that. Yeah, even you can see such questions like who plays what role. So it could be really important aspect for you to understand and remember what roles are being played by different people, because that could be a little confusing. So keep an eye on that as well. The next chapter is chapter 4, and it's really very critical in terms of answering the question, because it's completely technique based. So we have 12 marks to be secured from this chapter. It's sharing the maximum share in the examination. Out of 40, you have 12 questions from this chapter. So maybe this chapter can decide your future in the examination, that whether you will pass the examination or not. So if you are familiar with all the techniques, you have 12 questions in your basket. So make sure that you prepare well for all the techniques. So here generally they are categorized between 3 categories, and you have altogether 10 techniques to understand. So first of all, black box, white box, experience based are the 3 categories which are being used, and we have altogether the 9 techniques to understand. So the first is equivalence partition, where generally a range will be provided to you, and multiple ranges will be provided to you. All you need to do is tabulate it something like this, and just figure out how many ranges are prepared, and one test from each range will be taken as the answer. So whatever ranges you create, you just take one test from each range. So here are some sample questions which you can anyways look into the tutorial. If you have any questions about any techniques, please put it below so that I can help you. So there are different ways of asking the same question. Sometimes they ask you number of test cases, sometimes they ask you number of valid test cases, sometimes they ask you the values, sometimes they ask you the ranges. So just read the question carefully, because here the question is becoming more trickier than earlier. So if you skip any small thing, the answer would change. Similarly, the next technique is boundary value analysis, where here a single range will be probably given to you, and all you need to do is create that range, and you strictly test on the boundaries where you're trying to test the boundary values. And here we have two options, that is 2-point boundary value and 3-point boundary value. When you say 2-point boundary value, it generally means one inside, one outside, and one inside, one outside on both the boundaries, that is left boundary and right boundary. But when they mention 3-point boundary value, that means one on the boundary, one inside, one outside on both the boundaries. So, say for example, if your range is 18 to 30, let's take an example here. For example, this one. When you have a range 18 to 30 years, and uh, they don't they specify 2-point value, then this will be the answer, that is 17, 18, 30, and 31. But if they specify we want 3-point boundary values, then the answer will be 17, 18, 19, 29, 30, 31. So we say on the boundary, in the boundary, outside the boundary. But until unless it is specified. If it is not specifying anything, by default you go with 2-point value system. Okay, 2-point boundary values. If they have specified, please take care of that. If they are not specifying, it is 2-point value system. So that applies to any scenarios which they can ask you. Sometimes again they ask you values, sometimes they ask you the ranges and so on. The next is decision table. When you talk about decision table, it's just a table will be provided to you in the examination, and need to make sure that the true false conditions are met. It depends on the number of conditions. If there are two conditions, the number of outcomes will be four. I just missed it here. You're supposed last one is supposed to be test case 4. Okay, so true true, true false, false true, false false. So just make sure that that is there. And they may ask you what is the outcome depending on that particular table provided to you. What is the outcome of it? So they will give you situations in the question, and you need to find out the right option for that. Similar way, we have another one, that is state transition testing, where generally state transition testing takes place with help of a state transition diagram. And the state transition diagram will be provided to you in the examination. All you need to do is find out the number of valid transitions and invalid. Remember that invalid transitions are never shown in the diagram. So the one which is not shown will be invalid. So just make sure that you remember that, and according to that you try to fulfill the situation. On the other side, we have something called as use case testing as well, which you don't have to evaluate. It is a theory-based content, K2. So you just need to know what is use cases. So generally a template is being shown here, which will just help you to understand what use cases are. On the white side, of course, we have two techniques, and this play a very vital role where you talk about understanding a flowchart, where generally a flowchart consists of two major parameters, talking about the control flow diagram, where we have two major components. One is the branch and second is the nodes. So all the enclosed bodies here are called as nodes, and all the arrow marks are called as branches. So we just have to test these two things with help of two techniques. And then we generally measure the number of paths, minimum number of paths, which can be used to determine the statement coverage and decision coverage. For more detail, please visit the tutorial specifically and comment there if you still have any queries after this session also. So here we measure the statement coverage, and we find out that number of nodes to be covered required at least two paths. So without at least two paths, you need to cover all the nodes. Similarly, when it comes to other examples like this, you see that we need three paths at least to cover this entire scenario. So statement coverage is 3. So statement coverage is all about measuring that. And there's a small tip mentioned in the slide itself, that is there's a small formula to remember if you can. That is, you don't have to waste your time drawing the diagram and all. So only pseudocode will be provided to you in the examination, not the diagram. Diagram should be drawn by you and then derive the answer. But if you can remember this formula, that is 1 plus count of else, number of else in the program will give you the statement coverage. So if you see there are two else in the program, and these two else generally gives you the count of 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So statement coverage is 3. So easy to remember. Don't worry about that if you just follow the form. Again, here if you see statement coverage is 2, no matter how big is the control flow diagram is, but you have only one else in the program. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Yeah, other way around, they may also ask you the percentage rather, that I give you the diagram, I give you the test cases which I'm using, what percentage has been achieved. So the formula is statement coverage is equal to number of statements executed by the test cases divided by total number of statements in the diagram. And the diagram is provided to you where each circled item is called a statement and each arrow is called as decision. So 6 out of 8 statements are tested here, and the answer is 75%. Similarly, we have decision table, but instead of nodes, we test the branches here. So branches might be having a slight difference because sometimes there is no node, but the branch exists. So again, minimum number of path to cover all the branches. And there's a shortcut as well, where we say number of if in the pseudocode plus 1. So number of if plus 1 will give you the answer for decision coverage. So I have all the shortcuts, all possible ways to make your job easier to make you understand the content and get your examination with through. So still, all you need to do is just put across any queries, any doubts if you have to ask me. Same way for decision also, but here you need to count the branches instead of nodes. Experience-based techniques are basically theoretical based questions. So there are no calculations involved, so all you need to remember are the technique understanding, and keep them in mind that what are the important keywords which I have mentioned in each bulleted point here, and that is the only question which you can expect from these areas. So what is error guessing, what is decision tape, the experience-based technique like exploratory, and then working with checklist-based testing, which is a newly added topic in the syllabus, which makes it the 10th one. So earlier we had 9 techniques, now we have 10. Now you must be wondering that there are only 10 techniques and 12 questions from this chapter. Yes, because they have a choice to ask you 2 questions from any of the techniques once again. So 10 mandatory and 2 optional, which makes it like they can ask you 2 questions from anywhere else. So just be prepared for these things. Yeah, these are some good level of questions which can be asked to you from the technique. So please visit the tutorial for the same. So okay, before we move to chapter 5, let's quickly see if you have any questions coming up. Do we have flowcharts given with the questions for these questions? Okay, if they're asking you the statement cover minimum number of test cases, only pseudocode will be provided to you. But if they are asking you the coverage, then the flowchart will be given to you. So there are two different things. One is finding the number of minimum number of test cases. Second is finding the coverage measurement. So if it is the coverage measurement, it will be only about the percentage calculation. For that, they will give you the diagram and they will give you the test cases what they're trying with, that is the path what they're executing, and then they will ask you to calculate the percentage. But if they're asking you what is the minimum number of test cases required to achieve 100% statement coverage, then only code will be provided to you, and then you draw the diagram, find the number of test cases, and then give the answer. And that's the reason I have used a shortcut there to help you to minimize your effort for preparing the questions. So what generally happens there is you just read the program and count the number of else or number of ifs respectively for statement coverage and decision coverage, and then give your answer. So you don't have to really take your all the time out to resolve the diagram and other things. But it's just the difference is that when they ask you number of test cases, they will give you only only program, and when they talk about percentage coverage, they will give you the diagram. So Veena is asking, can I get some more information on chapter 4? Yeah, tell me specifically which technique are you looking at? So as you see, we have a little crunch on time. Maybe you can specify if you have any specific technique to undergo, then I can help you with that. Okay, so I'm not sure if she's there or not. Uh, just let me know. I'll help you with that technique. Okay. So the next thing what we are looking at is chapter 5, which is the most lengthiest chapter of the syllabus, and we will be talking about understanding a lot of key areas and key terminologies. Except understanding from the point of the terminologies of this entire testing. So as you move into the chapter 5, the test organization, test planning and estimation, test monitoring and control, configuration management, risk and testing, defect management. So test organization will generally tell you that what exactly it is, the organization structure, how people are distributed, how roles are distributed within the organization, how does it work, and so on. The test planning and estimation is about the planning which you're talking about. Yes, of course, the first topic also covers the task of a test manager and tester. So it's a straightforward point, no twist involved. The only twist they can use here is they can ask you which is not a task of a tester or which is not a task of the test leader. So you just have to be careful with that. Second part is planning and planning activities. Of course, we know about these things from the chapter 1 already, so it should not be difficult for you to map the things again. We talk about strategy. Of course, there are 7 standard strategies, and generally we do not expect a question from this because it is a advanced level topic and they have not discussed in detail. So make sure that you just know the name, that would be fine. Do not try to dig into that, it's of no use. This will not be expected in the examination at uh, you know a higher percentage, but you never know that 1% share. So please just know the name, that would be fine, but no need to dig into that. Entry criteria, exit criteria, test estimation, and talking about some of these things which are not expected in foundation. Execution schedule is a part of the test execution, which generally determines in what order the test should be executed, and it should be determined by the tester depending on the dependencies and the control flow of the requirement, which is a business model. Monitoring and control, again, we know a bit from the chapter 1 already. What is monitoring, what is control, but yes, you can expect a question from here. We have 8 questions coming from this chapter. So, you can expect 8 questions which comprise, put together with chapter 4, makes it 20. That is half the examination score. So 12 questions from chapter 4, 8 questions from chapter 5, 20 marks from there. Yeah, progress reports, of course, we know about it from chapter 1 again. Configuration management is a small topic which generally talks about managing the revisions on the history of the revisions on any entity when the document is being revised or updated from time to time. You manage a version control of that is what you call it as configuration management. Risk and testing, of course, here they are only talking about two things. What is a project risk? What is a product risk? So they will again give you certain examples and they'll ask you which one of this is a project risk or which one of this is a product risk. All you need to differentiate is between project and product risk. The one which hampers the process of making a product is called as project risk. That means anything which goes wrong internally before the release can happen is a project risk. Whereas product risk is something which hampers the end user and it is performed or it happens after the release of the product. So just differentiate that and you will be easy to get it. Defect management, of course, the DTLC might be a part of your examination, but they just want you to know the status as per the syllabus. But just to make you understand better, I've included this as a part of my presentation as well. So that's up to you. But the important part comes here when they say what is the objectives of writing a defect report, why it is important, and what a defect report must include. So here it is, all the information. So that completes the chapter 5. Anyways, should be fine with you. If you have any queries, you can look at the questions, which are very well determined as per the new syllabus. So these questions must help you to answer the questions. So see if you have any queries coming up from here. Okay, no. So all right, we are moving to the last chapter, which is about tool support for testing. It's being the smallest chapter and has only 2 questions contributing out of 40. So a lot of people say me that can we just skip that chapter just because of 2 marks? We don't want to get into more confusions or something. So personally speaking, I won't recommend you that you skip a chapter no matter it only has 2 questions. But you never know that if you have 24 from the other 5 and these 2 questions can play a really vital role. So you never take a chance. And it's not a big syllabus at all. It's a small thing. So never mind reading another chapter which only has 2 marks contribution, but you understand the worth of 2 marks when you are in the need of 2 marks. So I won't personally recommend you to skip, but it's up to you. If you think that you are very much confident with the 5 chapters and skipping this would help you to concentrate better on the 5 chapters, then you are good to go with that. Okay, you can take your call on that and decide what you really want to do. So take your call and decide. But personally speaking, take a chance by reading this 6th chapter also, because you never know when these 2 marks add value to it. So this chapter will be uh, having the test tool classification, where the first topic comes from the understanding on the consideration on the classification. So the tool categorization is provided to you here, that tool support for management of testing and testware, tool support for static testing, tool support for test design and implementation, tool support for test execution and logging. So there are a lot of tools which are categorized under this. You need to remember the category name, you need to remember the tool name, and specifically the tools which are marked with D. The D character represents made for developers specially. That means these tools are only used by developers, not testers. So they can really go with that way and ask you a typical question that which one of these given tools in the options are specially meant for developer. Then you need to be recalling that what are those tools which are used by developers. And it is easy to remember. You don't have to by heart this. Like for example, a test harness is generally to create stub and drivers, dummy modules, and of course, the testers do not create dummy modules. Unit test framework, unit testing is generally performed by developers. Of course, the tools will be for developer. Coverage measurement tool like code coverage, requirement coverage, unit test coverage tools, UTR, we generally call it as. Yeah, it is used by developers again because it is at the code level. Then we have further categories like tool support for performance, we have tool support for specialized testing needs, and so on. So benefits and risk would have another contribution from this section. They may ask you a question either from the classification or the risk and benefit. So please concentrate on that. And the last topic of this chapter is about the three parts of it. One is what selections, what considerations should you take into account when dealing with introducing a tool into the organization, how you generally roll out a tool into the organization. So that will be a major responsibility of the test manager within the organization. But yes, they are trying to give you a pinch of information right from the foundation so that you can look into that. Next is how do you roll out a tool into the organization? After conducting a proof of concept POC, you start with a pilot project. Pilot project, you give it to one of the projects in your organization and ask them to use that tool and collect real-time information based on your expectation earlier, what you considered before selecting a tool. And on the other side, you keep on monitoring the usage from the real time and see that if your calculations were correct or not. Then success factors for the tools generally help you to determine that even if your pilot project goes, fantastic, doesn't mean that you roll out to the rest of the organization at the same time. There are some considerations which you should take into account to roll out to the rest of the organization as well. So that's where this chapter concludes, and you have two questions coming from this chapter. So just make sure that you prepare well for the same. So that's all from here, team. If you have any questions, queries, I'll be here for some time. You're free to comment. I'll be just responding to your quick queries. And regarding the time management, you can take a call. You can just do the techniques first because there will be 12 questions from this chapter. So you can start with the techniques, resolve all the queries, and then come to the theory-based questions. Or the second approach is you start with theory and then come to the practical, that is the calculation based questions. Or the third thing is you take all the simple questions first and then go to the complicated ones which you think that you have complications involved. So it's just up to you how you want to take. We have three options to go with to manage the time, and trust me, if you go with your understanding and your control flow determined for it, then you can save a lot of time to do the examination within the given time limit. Uh, okay, so we have a question from Asif again. Does the question come in section wise? No, it will be jumbled up. Uh, so it will be completely jumbled up. It's just that when we are preparing, it comes chapter wise. We remember them or understand them, but in examination, it will not be oriented according to the chapters or topic wise. Maybe you can expect the very first question from chapter 5 or chapter 6. So that really doesn't bother them. So they can put the question in any order. You just have to be ready for that. So that's from the approach. Make sure that you read the question carefully. You try to understand the meaning behind the question, what they want to know from you, and then you try to look at the options, because options sometimes can be tricky, which may take you out of the concentration on the exact answer. Other videos present in channel? If not, can you guide us from where and how to prepare more? Yeah, see, first of all, the syllabus from the istqb.org, you can download it, and you can go through the entire PDF once by yourself. Following that, you can go through my videos, which will give you a quick recap on understanding everything, and also the tips of each chapter, that what you need to concentrate on generally from each chapter and each topic. Other than that, if you wish to, you can take some dumps or online assessment. There are a lot of websites which give you online quiz on ISTQB, which you can attempt and take a look on that, which will just give you a confidence that how much you need to prepare more on different topics and understand the same. So that's your call. If you want any suggestions, maybe you can drop your mail ID here. I'll be reverting you back with the supporting dumps, which will help you. So we are done with this. If you have anything else, you can comment it below. Even after the session is over, you can comment your queries on any of the respective videos. I keep on monitoring them from time to time, so I will help you with that, as early as possible. So we are done with the 6 chapters. We have understood everything. We have recalled. So just prepare well for the examination. So I'll be here for some time. Take your time to respond well. All right, then, considering that everything is fine, we are winding up the session. We'll be back with another live session sometime later, so you'll be notified about the same. So make sure that you make most out of these opportunities. And thanks for being online. Thank you, team. Take care and happy learning. All the very best for the examination. Yeah, Vina, I'll just ping you with my mail ID. Don't worry. I'll reply to the comment. Thank you. All right, team. Thank you for being online. It was pleasure being online for you and solving your queries and doing this live session. We'll be coming back with another one soon in future. But meanwhile, get going through the tutorials. If you have any queries, keep commenting. I'll be there to assist you with the same thing at any point of time. Keep enjoying, keep learning, keep exploring the content, and feel free to reach me for any queries and doubts. I'll be there to assist you at any point of time. So happy learning, team. All the best for your examination. Take care.